What's up guys, I'm BTC. There are 3 DPS heroes that function as medium range hitscan, so today I'm going to explain which hero is the best depending on the situation. The 3 hitscan damage heroes I'm going to talk about are Ashe, McCree, and Soldier 76. Often when these characters are compared, it's typically done in the form of, this hero is always better than the other one, but in truth, there are a lot of different situations, team comps, and other variables that determine which of these 3 is most optimal in any particular time or situation, as each of them have their own differing strengths and weaknesses. I don't want to just ramble on about these 3 heroes, instead, let me show you all the different stats and scenarios. We'll start with some basic comparisons. For damage per hit, Ashe has the highest of 85 when using ADS, although McCree is right behind her. Rate of fire, Soldier is far ahead of the other 2. Spread angle is how much off-center rapid-fire attacks will become. For Soldier 76, this means he needs to attack in shorter bursts in order to minimize this, but for Ashe and McCree, there is no spread. Every attack goes exactly where the crosshair is. Ashe's hip fire does have a 1.85 spread, but you're really only going to use this at extreme close range, so it doesn't affect much. For vertical mobility, Ashe is by far the best, McCree has none, and Soldier has minimal with the Helix rocket jumps, but if these heroes need to get to high ground, Ashe will always win that. Horizontal mobility is a different story. Soldier's sprint allows him to move around far better than the other 2. For barrier breaking potential, Ashe is quite weak. McCree can be good, but generally he has to be close enough to use Fan the Hammer for his best barrier breaking potential. Soldier 76, however, you can just hold down the attack and fire Helix rockets to quickly destroy enemy barriers. Aside from their normal attacks, Ashe has fairly high damage potential with her abilities, McCree has almost none, and Soldier's Helix rockets are also pretty good. For crowd control, Ashe has the knockback from the coach gun, McCree has the stun, which is great for setting up more damage, and Soldier has effectively none. For healing, Ashe and McCree, of course, don't have any, and Soldier's healing is quite good at almost 49 healing per second and a total of 204. For ultimate strength, there are a lot of variables that can go into this, but generally, Ashe's ultimate is going to be fairly strong in both damage and disruption capabilities. For McCree, his ultimate is one of the worst in the game, and I know some people are going to have a hard time believing this, but keep in mind, quite often, higher skill McCree players use his ultimate High Noon as nothing more than a quick reload, meaning that they attack until empty, and if their roll is on cooldown, they'll activate the ultimate and immediately cancel it, simple for the reload function. That's how bad McCree's ultimate really is. For Soldier 76, if the enemy team has no barriers, then Tactical Visor can be quite strong, but oftentimes when you're running Soldier, it's because you're going against a barrier lineup, meaning it's going to be a little less effective than you would like. Now let's start talking about how these heroes will work against each other specifically, and then we'll go into how they fare against other characters in the game. So versus each other, for the strengths, Ashe is going to be better at medium and long range because of her higher damage potential and the benefit of aiming down the sights. McCree will do better at short range where his stun and fan hammer combo can make short work of the other 2. Soldier will work best when the fight begins to drag on. His self-healing allows him to sustain and outlast the other 2. Now for weaknesses, Ashe is the exact opposite of Soldier in those long fights. Her cooldowns are longer, so she gets to use them less often than the other heroes, and the function of her reload makes her weaker as the fight drags on, longer because she'll find herself with less and less ammo available as that fight keeps going on. McCree's weakness comes from the inability to get high ground easily. Ashe can just use her coach gun to get up there, and Soldier can sprint and get into position on high ground fairly quickly, but McCree has to slowly run over there, which means he's taking himself out of the fight during that time he's trying to move up there, removing his effectiveness from the fight and also hurting his team. Soldier's primary weakness in these matchups is that he has a very limited finishing capability. The only thing he has is the Helix rocket, which is on an 8-second cooldown. so if one of the other two is being healed, it makes it more difficult for Soldier to finish them off, whereas Ashe and McCree can just land a critical, and for the most part that will ignore any healing and just outright kills their opponent. Aside from how effective these heroes can be against each other, it's also important to know who these heroes are good against and what sort of lineups they should be running and who they should be trying to counter. We're going to go through some of the basic strengths and weaknesses versus the other heroes, but please keep in mind this is not a complete listing, but it should give you a fairly good idea of appropriate situations to run each hero. To start, let's look at who they're strong against. The first thing you'll notice is that all three are strong counters to Pharah. The Hitscan heroes are the best for dealing with her, but it's important to note, however, that if you're running against a Pharah Mercy combo, that one of these Hitscans by themselves will likely not be enough. The basic math is that it's a 2 versus 1, and you can't really expect the McCree on your team to deal with that by himself. Someone else needs to assist. You can do this by running a second Hitscan, a Mercy for damage boost, or a Zenyatta for the Discord. Another fairly strong matchup they all have is against Junkrat. Beyond him, you'll start to see a lot more variety in who these heroes are good against. For Ashe, she'll be good against most heroes that are unable to take high ground or close the distance quickly. She can also be fairly effective against Bastion with the use of her dynamite and poke damage. Both Ashe and McCree are good against Mercy, particularly in the Pharah Mercy combo, because they can do higher burst damage that doesn't give the Mercy in the air the time for her self-heal to recover. You'll notice that McCree is particularly effective against the backline flankers. The stun and follow-up damage combo are very effective against those heroes that would normally be able to escape. You could also include Reaper in this grouping as well, I just didn't have enough space for him. Soldier, on the other hand, is going to be more effective against barriers in general, as he is significantly better at barrier break than the other two Hitscan. One hero in this group that you might think is somewhat out of place is Roadhog. Oftentimes, Roadhog is referred to as an ultimate battery, meaning that enemies can charge their ultimate quite effectively off of him. For this reason, that's why I included Roadhog versus the Soldier. Not because Soldier is going to be able to get the elimination on the Roadhog, but rather Soldier can use him to simply charge his ultimate tac visor very quickly, and then use it to eliminate the rest of Roadhog's team. Moving on to the weaknesses, you'll notice that the first three are the same across the board. D.Va, Hammond, and Winston are all extremely effective against these three Hitscan heroes. There will be varying amounts of effectiveness based on exactly which matchup is happening, but in general, those three, D.Va, Hammond, and Winston, are going to be the heroes that you want to avoid. Widowmaker and Hanzo also pose their own kind of problem to these three Hitscan, for the simple fact that they tend to play a little bit further back, so the damage fall off from Soldier, McCree, and Ashe is going to play a part in how many hits it actually takes in order to eliminate the opponent. So for Widowmaker and Hanzo, they can get one-shot kills, but for Ashe, McCree, and Soldier, they might take anywhere between 2 and 8 hits in order to deal with the Widowmaker or Hanzo, depending on just how far back they are. So those tend to be bad matchups, again, something you would want to avoid. Ashe also has a particular problem against Orisa. Because her barrier break is so bad, Orisa is able to just drop down a new barrier whenever Ashe actually gets any sort of significant damage done to the previous one. On top of that, the dynamite, if thrown above it, doesn't do a whole lot because of Orisa's armor, and the fortify will cancel out most of the damage. Contrast this with Ashe versus Reinhardt, where it actually forces Reinhardt to disengage a little bit when his barrier is broken, so it's not that much of a problem, but Orisa for Ashe definitely is. For Ashe and Soldier, both Tracer and Genji can be very problematic. However, Ashe has less of a problem with some of the other heroes like Mei or Doomfist, as the Coach Gun provides Ashe with an escape. Soldier, on the other hand, doesn't have that option, as Sprint tends to be really bad versus crowd control effects. Now you should have a pretty good idea of what each of these heroes is capable of, and who they're generally going to be strong or weak against. So now let's move on to team comps and maps. Ashe can be run in a variety of team compositions, most standard 2-2-2 lineups, and she particularly excels on maps that grant high ground positioning but can be difficult to get for other heroes. The first point of Numbani is a good example of this, where Ashe can easily move from low to high ground with little effort, whereas McCree and Soldier can start on the high ground, but if they fall down, they won't be getting back to the top of high ground anytime soon. Things that Ashe should be avoiding are when the enemy team is running heavy barrier or dive team comps, as Ashe will not be all that effective in either of those situations. McCree needs more support than the other two Hitscan. He generally needs a barrier to provide cover for him, and he excels in maps that have limited high ground. If everyone is on the same ground level, after all, then McCree's lack of vertical mobility never comes into play. Additional maps that have smaller capture points can also be good for McCree, as it forces the enemy to get up closer where his stun fan hammer combo is most effective. McCree is particularly good and likely the best anti-flanker hero in the game now that Brigitte has been nerfed. Soldier is the most independent of these three, with strong horizontal mobility from sprint and sustain from his self-heal. The healers on his team can focus more on the other teammates and worry less about Soldier. His burst damage potential is limited by the Helix rocket, but he has much better sustained damage than the other two. This makes him the best option when barrier break is required. Soldier is also good at dealing with enemy turrets, whether they're from Symmetra or Torbjorn. Soldier can be run in most 2-2-2 lineups or on any map with a choke point that you know will definitely be defended by a barrier. If the enemy team is running a dive, however, Soldier is going to have an extremely hard time being effective. Of these three heroes, Ashe does seem to be the strongest in general, at this point in time at least, and should likely be run more often than the other two. However, this doesn't mean that McCree and Soldier are worthless and shouldn't be played. If you find yourself in a situation where the enemy team has pesky flankers, then McCree is the better option. If the enemy team is running a bunker-style, barrier-heavy lineup, then you definitely want to go with Soldier instead. Hopefully now you have a better understanding of what each of these three Hitscan heroes are capable of, and what situations they'll work best in. Thanks for watching, and if you'd like to see more, subscribe and hit that bell so you don't miss anything. Also, come hang out in my Discord server and my Twitch live stream. Special thanks to my Patreon supporters. If you'd like to see what kind of cool VIP rewards you can get, check the links down below. And remember, always blame the controller, because it's never your fault.